We got the first, I guess, part of today. We've got some big themes that we're going to explore. And the first one, I guess, is right at the beginning is this big decision, retirement. What is retirement anyway? What is this place, this entity that we call retirement? What we thought we'd do during the course of the day is, they're not case studies, but through video, through the lives of people like you and I, just get a glimpse of some of these questions through their lives. So let's take a look at our first big question. What is retirement?
Age is just a number, or so they say. You hear things like 50 is the new 30, and people living to 120. So what does it mean to grow older? What does it mean to retire? Truth is, it means different things to different people.
I kind of figured by the time you hit 50, it's not the time to sort of give up on everything, but rather go out and enjoy yourself. And I was really quite fortunate that I had the skill of skydiving under my belt after 20 years of, jumping and 11,000 jumps. You become pretty proficient. And so, yeah, last year I found myself in Thailand, Libya, Kenya, pretty much around the world, just going for world record jumps and, a lot of fun, really. What I found over time is we get conditioned as kids really to sort of grab a mortgage and go straight into debt. And I actually reckon you should have the right direction by the time you get to 50 and a bit of spare cash and, go and enjoy it. I see a lot of people who are actually younger than me that have actually already given up hope. And I think definitely you should be looking at life as a whole as a great thing rather than complaining about it. Get moving, basically. As long as you've done, some financial management to get you where you need to be, you don't have to be a gazillionaire. As long as, you're comfortable and you can get by, you can do lots of things, It could even just be you might enjoy walking, that's better than sitting on the couch.
Alexander Forbes, securing your financial well-being.
Okay, so that's Ralph's story. Look, we're not saying that everybody must jump out of planes, but I think what it does say is that, retirement can be the start of yet a new adventure, and it can be any adventure that you want it to be. But the question is, what does this space look like? What are the things that we need to consider? What are the questions that we need to be asking to prepare ourselves for this particular environment? Well, to help explore this, we've got a panel that's going to be joining us now on stage, and to lead us in this discussion, we have Bruce Cameron, Jeff Spiller, and it'll be facilitated by Laura Duprier.
Well, because of a power failure here in a big storm, I had bread and cheese. I think Winston Churchill. I've also found that in my own life, it's patience. I take my retirement. Why am I enjoying retirement? Because I was patient. Apple, very much Apple. I love Apple. Everything I've got is Apple. I do my best work probably at 2 o'clock in the morning. Classical music, with Beethoven being my favorite composer. Life. I love living.
Breakfast in my room. I'm an Android user. Staying happy, doing what you want to do, achieving what you want to achieve. I'm definitely a night owl. Constantly learning new things, discovering things you didn't know.
Two boiled eggs, 2 pieces of rye toast, some butter and some salt and pepper, and a cup of tea. Mick Jagger of the Stones, and I was a tennis freak, so probably Jimmy Connors or John McEnroe. I think laughing a lot, enjoying yourself, getting to know people on a personal level. Jimi Hendrix, John Cleese's autobiography, the pride I have in my job and my clients and getting to know people.
Good morning, everybody. As Peter said, we're kicking off today's Ready, Set, Retire conference with this panel discussion. I'm going to ask Bruce and Jeff some questions. And the reason why we've chosen Preez and Jeff, who you got to meet a little bit through the videos there, is so that Jeff can give us the financial advisor's point of view, and Preez, who was founding editor of Personal Finance, and in that role for many years dealt with queries from people about retirement, wrote a lot about retirement, and now has himself gone through the process of, I won't say retiring, but slowing down. Okay. And Peter mentioned that we're not here to give you the blueprint, and I just want to emphasize that as well. You can ask Preez and you can ask Jeff exactly how they would go about retiring, but we're actually not here to tell you how you should do it, but more to raise the issues that you should think about and to the ones on which you may want to consider getting advice. And so with that in mind, Jeff, can I start with you and ask you, could you give us an idea of what does retirement mean for an individual?
Thanks, Laura. I think it's one of the most misunderstood words in the English language. Quite literally, all the people here today have different views on what the word retirement means. For some people, it's a huge transition. It could be the end of their world, but for many, it's the start of a new scenario, it's the start of a new life, it's the start of a new set of circumstances, and they look forward to that day when they retire, in inverted commas, and we can have a look at what that actually means. You do find, particularly in the job that I do, people that retire, according to the common use of that word, in other words, they stop working, and yet, strangely enough, they're back in the same office the next day, literally doing the same job. So has he retired or hasn't he? So certainly for me, I think there's a legal dynamic which says that the individual formally retires as far as SARS is concerned, and he formally exits his pension provident funds, possibly his retirement annuities. But if we look at that word retirement, it definitely means a process of planning for each person in this audience here, including myself. It's thinking about that day in which your life could possibly change. And you're going to start planning well in advance. You're going to be looking at the numbers. I need X amount of money in order for me to retire, which will give me X income, and X income then generates X lifestyle. And you need to sit down, I think, beforehand and say, okay, that day that I retire, what am I going to be doing the next day? Are we going to be living in the same house? Are we going to be living in the same area? Am I going to be doing this? Am I going to be doing that? So for me, it's a very significant day as far as clients are concerned. And it's a day in which for many of them, not all of them, but for many of them, their life changes.
So both a financial and a mental preparation.
Very much so.
Preez, there's a number of factors that people should consider when they're thinking about retirement. Can you take us through some of those factors? And Jeff, if you've got some that you want to add in?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm a pensioner. And I know I'm a pensioner because I get pensioner discounts. But 10 days ago, I was skiing on a mountain called Mount Panossus outside Greece, running black slopes. And in the evening, I was researching an article on the problems with valuations of bonds on the South African Stock Exchange. That's what retirement is for me. I've been lucky, I've eased into it, working initially the first year after I was retired. I had to retire. I continued to work full time. But now I've found that I've adjusted into a different lifestyle. I work some days I don't, I play other days, but every day I try and do something. And as in that movie, you know, the point is, and as the point that Peter made, you're basically as old as you feel you are. For some people, though, retirement is a shock. And I have a friend who was a chief executive of quite a big company in South Africa, and he retired to Sedgefield. He suddenly found he was at the bottom of the food chain. Even the dog barked at him. So retirement is not just about getting the finances right. That is very important because that will enable you to do all sorts of other things. But you have to adjust to a different way of life. And you have to start thinking about this way earlier, as you have to with the finances. The big difference is when you reach that sort of retirement age, is that you live in what I call the death zone. People are starting to die around you, and you don't know how much time you've got. I've worked out that I'm going to live to 102. I'm one of the lucky ones. I know exactly when. And if I do pass it, I'm going to take get a motor on my Zimmer flame and take it over the edge of Table Mountain. But it means you've got to fill your life. You know, you don't just suddenly switch off because you're a retiree. I found also that if you say to somebody, I'm a pensioner, and they're younger than you and they're not pensioners, this shutter comes down. They sort of look at you like you're an idiot. You don't have to be like that. So I never tell anybody I'm a pensioner nowadays unless I want a discount. So my view is that the most successful way to go into retirement is to do it gradually. It's not always possible, but that is the best way to do it. And this way I found it's been easier. It's not absolutely smooth, but it is much easier that way.
Thanks, Preez. And there were some points that you wanted to make about the financial aspects of retirement?
Yeah, you'll have to make, I mean, a lot of people have to make a lot of decisions before retirement. Unfortunately, most people only start thinking about those decisions more or less a day or so before. I'm sure I can be backed up on that by any financial advisor who people arrive at their doors and said, it's your chance to get famous. I've only got 10 Rand to retire on. Make it work. But one of the most important decisions you've got to make is when you retire and what sort of retirement annuity you're going to retire on. Now, a lot of people think that even R1 million is a lot of money. It isn't when it comes to retirement. And I've deliberately chosen these figures that are on the slide at the moment, the 30 million benefit, just to show you that if you want to really retire in luxury, you know, with an income of over 100,000 a month, then you need a lot of money. 5 million Rand is not a lot of money. And when you see those figures that most people retire with a replacement rate, and the replacement rate is the percentage your pension is going to be of what you were earning on the day you retired. So if you were earning 100 Rand on the day you retired, you would only be getting 29.6% on average. You'll see other figures later in the day which shows that those figures are actually worse than what they look, because more than 50% of people are retiring on less than 10,000 Rand a month. And you can't survive on those small amounts. So you have to start planning early. It's difficult to start planning early, but you have to start. Those are the figures there on the replacement ratios. But can we go back one slide, Laura? The point I want to make on this one is that people also just make assumptions. You'll hear later in the day that 80% of people, when they retire, select living annuities. But I did a bit of research, and I found that most people would actually get a better pension if they retired with what's called a guaranteed annuity. Now, these are guaranteed annuities. There are different parameters for guaranteed annuities, but these ones escalate. The ones that I've used as an example escalate at 5%. There's a 75% pension. 75% of that pension will be paid if the one spouse dies. But if you retired and went and bought a living annuity where you take the risk, if you retired with a 10 million Rand benefit, your drawdown rate shouldn't exceed 4% if you're going to make that pension last for the rest of your life, particularly if you're going to live to 102 like I intend to do. You can't draw down more than 4%. Now, if you take 4% of 10 million, that's only 33,000 a month. So you would be better off with a guaranteed annuity. What a lot of people do is they buy a living annuity because they haven't saved enough money, and then they draw down too much, and then they won't be able to afford to live to 102. They'll be lucky if they get to 72 before they start running out of money. So these are very important issues that you have to take into account long before you retire. So not only your lifestyle, but how much money you've got. Some years ago, somebody was being laid off as a teacher. Well, his wife phoned me. He was the headmaster of a well-known high school in the Western Cape. And I said to her, well, what's the package? She said, oh, 500,000. Have you got children? Yes, 3 at school. I said, well, now just work out 10% of 500,000. Can you survive on that?
So people see millions often as big figures where they're not that big. And you need more often than what's just in that retirement fund. Because most retirement funds only aim at giving you 75% of your as a replacement ratio after 40 years of employment. So you have to be very careful of those things as well.
Thanks, Bruce. Jeff, I'm hoping that nobody comes into your office with only 10 Rand to retire on, but perhaps you could give us a client experience of someone who's successfully made that transition from working life to retirement?
Yeah, I can actually think of quite a few. They always seem to have the same things in common. They always seem to have started thinking about their retirement at a fairly young age. And I'm not talking 18, 20, although technically when you first start working is probably the right way to think about retirement. But probably from about age 30, they started to focus on this scenario which was going to happen one day. And they knew at that stage that it would happen at, for argument's sake, age 65. So not only did they start to accumulate wealth in their formal retirement vehicles, such as a pension fund, a provident fund, they started to build up wealth in other facets as well, for argument's sake, shares, share options, unit trusts, money offshore, whatever it may be. And all along the way, they were thinking about this inevitable cutoff in their life. And I think one of the major points that I notice about successful, and I say that in inverted commas, retirement, is the buy-in from the spouse, on the assumption that we do have what I would call a typical husband and wife scenario. The spouse is very much part of this, even though the spouse technically may not have accumulated that wealth. It was accumulated within a couple environment, a marriage environment, and he or she, depending on who the breadwinner was, bought into the eventual decision. There's nothing worse than working in a company, getting close to retirement, thinking that you're going to sell up, you're going to move down to a lovely place like Simonstown, you're going to play golf there 4 times a week, and you're going to have a hell of a party. And your spouse says to you, I don't like this idea, I don't like the Southeaster, I don't want to live in Cape Town, it's the last place I want to live. I want us to go and live with the kids in Australia. Now maybe you should have been discussing that in the previous 15 years rather than the day before you retire. So for me, to answer your question, it's the amount of preparation and thought which goes into the process which often determines how successful and how enjoyable the retirement process is.
Thanks, Jeff. Bruce, Jeff has mentioned the idea of starting to think about retirement a lot earlier than is often the case. Could you outline for us a bit of the impact of when you make that decision to think about your retirement and start planning for it?
Well, it's always a difficult question, that, because Jeff said that very few people start thinking about it until they reach age 20. But if you look at these slides, you should start saving at age 20. But if you're at age 20, retirement is probably the last thing on your mind. A new Golf GTI is probably much higher up your list of priorities. These figures are very conservative, by the way. To retire with a 58% replacement ratio after you start retiring or saving at age 20 for retirement is very unlikely. You'd probably be much closer, much more over 75, around 75%. But the problem is when you start planning for retirement, say at age 40, and even worse at age 50, to start saving for retirement, you can see it's just not going to happen. You're going to retire with very serious financial problems, particularly if you can't continue working, as is the case with some people. My view always is that at the age of 30, you should be planning, you should be starting, and quite seriously. And depending on when you have children, I mean, one thing I found was that when my children left university, I was in my early 50s, the amount of money I could save jumped enormously. You don't realize how much children cost you until they're no longer there. And you've got to use that extra money to top up for your retirement. Firstly, because most retirement funds only aim at giving you a 75% replacement ratio. And I found now, for instance, that I spend more money than I spent when I was working. The reason being that when I was working about 18 hours a day, didn't have any time to actually spend money. But now I have a lot more time in my hands. I spend a lot more money than I did before. So don't work on the assumption that you're going to spend less money in retirement. Most people are probably going to spend more, particularly if they live the lifestyles they want to live. So you need to start thinking about all those sort of things. I mean, you've got to start at the end, what you want when you're reaching age 30. And you have to share that with your spouse, as Jeff says, and with your advisor. If you don't do that sort of thing, you're not going to achieve those goals. And you're going to hear a lot about achieving goals today. But you need to set those goals early if you're going to be successful.
Thanks, Bruce. Jeff, could you, now that we've got a bit of an idea of what this retirement decision is about, could you outline for us the risks that we may face both in the saving for retirement and after retirement?
I think if you don't mind, Laura, let's separate them into pre and post-retirement. Bruce and I have just pointed out, I think the most obvious one is that we simply don't have enough money. We have not accumulated enough money during our lifestyle. We have a figure in our minds. That figure differs from the reality, and that partly determines what's going to happen in the future. I think we'll come back to that one. There are some people, and I would hope nobody in the audience, but one never knows, I have met them, who have done very little saving at all. Does that mean that they're spendthrift people, that they're bad people? No, of course it doesn't. But by the time they come to retire, that figure is incredibly low that they have to fund the rest of their lives. And they might have invested in the wrong investment over the years. They might have invested in a company that doesn't exist anymore. The children, God bless them, can consume vast quantities of one's wealth, as I well know. And that could have run down the capital over the years. So those two situations, I think, are the starting point: not having enough capital and not saving at all. On the display, you'll see the third one, which is non-preservation. Rather a fancy word, but simply meaning that as you change jobs over the years, and many people have as many as 6 or 7 jobs, they can have as many as 3 different careers in their lifetime. Well, in their lifetime to retirement, maybe they'll have 1 or 2 after retirement. They do not preserve, they do not keep their pension or provident fund money. They spend it. And it's certainly one of the biggest nightmares in my job, and for many of my colleagues. The person who is 42 years old, he's getting retrenched, or he's resigned, he's joining another company, and he wants to pay off a debt. He wants to buy a new car. He wants to go overseas. So not only does he pay tax on the sum that he saved for X number of years of employment, but obviously he goes and consumes it. He may then drive a very nice car, and good luck to him, but he doesn't have those years of service and the capital, plus the compounding effect, which he would have done. The wrong investment strategy appears on the display, and that really refers to being in the wrong type of investment products, perhaps being an aggressive investor and being in a conservative fund. If you're 30 years old and you're invested in money market inside of your company pension fund and you stay there, you are going to go nowhere fast. You're going to get a lousy rate of return. You can justify it by saying, oh, it's safe. Well, great. But your money certainly isn't going to grow, and you're not going to keep track with inflation. Possibly closer to retirement, you may opt for a more conservative strategy. There are those clients, and Laura, if you'd allow me to digress, I'll give you an example. There are those clients that retire too early. This is an interesting one, and it's often those clients who shouldn't retire too early, and there are a number of reasons. 9 times out of 10, they're emotional reasons. And if I may tell you of one example that I had, a chap who worked for a very well-known pharmaceutical company in Johannesburg, he got to the age of 56, my age today, and he got the bee in the bonnet that he wants to retire. Now, at first he wouldn't give one the reason. Eventually he broke down and gave me the reason. And I hear where he's coming from. His father died in the office whilst being employed. And naturally, this man at that stage didn't want the same thing to happen to him. I think we could all understand that if that had happened to us, our parents. If your father had died at work, I guess you get to a stage where you think, it's the last thing I want to happen to me, I'm going to go and enjoy myself. The problem was that when we looked at him in a cold, analytical, factual way, he simply did not have enough money. And Bruce has alluded to the issue of longevity. And we all know people, and I look at the people in front of me. When you were young, I bet you anyone that got to 65 was an old fogey. Now, it's shifted. People are climbing Mount Everest when they're 75, 80. They're traveling the world. The longevity issue has arrived in the Western world in particular. And we spent a lot of time with this particular client. Put it in writing to him several times. Said to him, please don't retire and sit at home and do nothing from an income generation perspective. Because it wasn't as if he was going to leave his employer, then do something else. He literally was going to stay at home. I guess watch TV and do the gardening. Well, sure enough, at age 62, it came to a head. His capital had been falling. The markets weren't that good at that time, so he wasn't getting a pickup from the investment market. And he went out to work. And as I speak today, he must be 66, 67. He drives a taxi. So I think there's a great situation if you work because you want to. But when you work because you have to, and it's in a job that you are unaccustomed to, beneath you, if I want to be arrogant about it, then at the end of the day, there's an issue. So those, I think, are some of the pre-retirement risks. Perhaps we could look at the post-retirement risks. So in other words, after we've formally retired. For the audience, they are on the display. Again, if you haven't saved enough before you retire, well, you're not going to have enough the day after you retire, so that's pretty obviously insufficient savings. I'm going to go across. So the issue of inflation. For those of you who were around in the 1980s, you'll remember very different days in South Africa, but inflation was running at double digits. People like me sit here and we tell you CPI is 6%, 6.1%. But if you were to look at your own index of inflation, the people in the audience here today, the Smith index could be 14% a year. I know that my index must be 15%, and many of you might have up to 20%, depending on your lifestyle and how you spend your money. So inflation, the gradual erosion of the buying power of your capital, is for me one of the biggest problems that we're all going to face in retirement. It certainly has come back into our lives in the last 5 or 6 years, where in reality, each one of you out there is facing double-digit inflation. And I'm going to pick the next one, which doesn't fall in sequence here, but medical cost inflation, and I know that Anthea is going to spend quite a bit of time on that today, is quite literally going to be eating away at your pension rather faster than what you thought it would do. And one sees that in my job, where the fellow used to spend 5,000 Rand a month on his medical aid, it's now 7,000, 8,000. His pension's more or less the same, but it's eating away at his pension. So medical inflation for each one of you, we all experience it. You can survive when you're working, but when you're retired, it becomes an issue. Consumption, again, Bruce hinted at it. So you retire. Well, you've got to have a new car. Why? Nobody knows why. But you justify it because, well, you know, I want a new car because I don't want to be in a situation where I have large maintenance bills on my old car. So you rush out and spend 400,000 on the new car. Then you decide over the years, because you have to do something with your money, to slowly but surely consume some of your savings on large ticket items, an extension to the house, a couple of very nice overseas trips, etc., etc., etc. So the discretionary part of your savings, in other words, that money not in your pension or not governed by the Pensions Fund Act, decreases, and you actually get to the stage where you don't have much left. You may have your pension, you may have your living annuity, you may be worth X million, but you don't have much on the other side of the equation. So I think those are some of the risks post the date of formal retirement.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. So it's clear that the decisions you make around your retirement planning are crucially important, and that some of them can actually be quite complex. Jeff, I'm not going to ask you whether I should seek financial advice about the retirement decision, because I know what your answer is going to be, but maybe if you could just give us some of the reasons why we should seek financial advice about the retirement decisions.
Now, of course, Laura, I'm not the most neutral person in the world on this one. I earn my living from being an investment advisor. I'd like to think, without being too patronizing and paternalistic, that when an individual gets close to the retirement decision, he does tend to seek the opinions of other people. And at the first stage, that may be friends or family. What did you do, Jim? Oh, I did this, this, and this. What went wrong? This went wrong. What went right? This went right. But if you want a more dispassionate, neutral, more objective view of that process of retirement, I think a professional financial advisor, and there are many different types of advisors out there, can help to add value. How? Well, first of all, he's going to help you to formulate a plan. That's a plan that requires the buy-in of yourself, your spouse, possibly your family. It's a plan for the future. It's not just a stab in the dark. It's a formal written plan. The advisor undertakes to do certain things during a certain time period, and you, the client, the retiree, undertake to do certain things. The role of the advisor is not just to help you formulate that plan, it's to help you stay on track over the years. And I know in these days of internet access, I see people on their phones and computers even here, you can perhaps sometimes position an argument where you'll be your own financial advisor, and possibly some people can. There are others who need guidance, they need support, they need their handheld in the tough times. It's wonderful to be a financial advisor and have a client in equities in the last 6 years. It wasn't quite so wonderful in September 2008 when the Johannesburg All-Share Index was at 17,900. Those were emotional days. Money had gone down 20–25%. So the interaction and the empathy comes in on an important stage. What I've also noticed as well is clients who do follow their financial affairs, who do get involved, great, we welcome it. But often they reach a stage where either they lose interest in doing that, or quite literally, health-wise, mentally or physically, they're not capable of doing so. Then the trusted financial advisor or the organization comes into play, where the relationship is powerful, and I think that to me is one of the major points. Another reason, Laura, is that, as you will discover once you start a do-it-yourself attitude, there's a multitude of products and services out there. There's over 900 funds that you can have in a living annuity. It's important that you feel comfortable with the organizations concerned. The advisor is constantly being trained, constantly attending presentations, constantly keeping up to date. That's how I spend my Sunday evenings, reading where the industry is going, what new funds are available, those sort of things. So I think you get that added value from the advisory capacity over and above the trust relationship. And I'm afraid to say it, but like everyone else in life, we're all going to die one day. And if you've built up a relationship with the advisor and you need your spouse to be looked after by somebody that you know and trust, well, I'm not doing this to cause fear or anything like that. But that's also, I think, a big plus in the long term, for a long-term relationship with a financial advisor.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Now that you've made that strong case for financial advice, Bruce, would you tell us how you would go about selecting a trusted and suitably qualified financial advisor?
Well, let me start by saying I do believe that the vast majority of people do need financial advice. Peter, in his introduction and the other centres, referred to the dangers of not knowing what you don't know. And that's, I think, a very, very valid point. So I hope you make the point again, Peter, but obviously because you've turned 50, you've become a bit forgetful like me. So it is essential that people have financial advice, but the important thing is that you get financial advice from the correct person. There are a lot of people out there who claim to be financial advisors who will go and try and sell you things like property syndications, which a lot of pensioners have been sold and have lost. There've been loss of billions of rands. So you have to be very, very careful about who you choose. In much the same way as you would choose any other professional, a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, you take care and you have to find somebody who you trust. But there are some basic things that you have to get to first. The most important probably is qualification. There are people who do sort of 6-week courses and then they're put out in the street to go and flog life insurance products, which are not very suitable. But all they're doing is flogging a product in the interest of the commission they're going to earn, the profits of the insurance company, but most times not in your interests. So you need somebody who knows about the industry, the broad span of it. And there's only really one qualification, and that's a certified financial planner. If you find somebody who's a certified financial planner, you're sure to have the expertise. Those people have written difficult exams. Both Laura and Jeff are CFPs, as far as I know. Well, Laura definitely is, I know. But I know that, for instance, Alexander Forbes is one of the few companies that insists that its advisors become certified financial planners. It's accredited by the Financial Planning Institute. By the way, you can find out, or you can seek a certified financial planner by going to the website www.fpi.co.za, and you can find all the CFPs in your geographical area. So you could approach them and start speaking to them. And the important thing also is not only are they qualified, but they have to abide by a code of conduct. If they don't abide by their code of conduct and there's a complaint against them and there's a hearing, they get kicked out. They lose their status as a CFP. So it's not a risk that most will take. Obviously, you'll find a bad egg every now and then, but the chances are dramatically reduced. The other important thing to me is that it's a very complex world, financial advice. And even when somebody is a CFP, they're not going to have all the knowledge and all the expertise and keep up with all the changes. I mean, tax alone is such a complicated issue and can be complicated depending on what your financial structures look like. So a one-person show who's just a single person running a business on their own is not likely to have that backup. So you need to be looking for somebody who's a member of a network or companies sort of like Alexander Forbes, where they have backup. And you're going to see that sort of backup in today's presentations, where they've got experts in law, experts in tax, experts in investment. So the advisor can, if they don't know, they can go and draw on that expertise. The one thing I've always felt about financial advice is a financial advisor's not there to find you the next investment that's going to shoot the stars out. That's not their job at all, and you shouldn't be looking to a financial advisor to do that. They should be identifying the type of investments and the type of risk you should be taking. The expertise on choosing the actual underlying investments should be left to people who are certified financial analysts, who are qualified to do that, far better qualified. Obviously, a certified financial planner is going to have a very good idea of it, but that backup will make all the difference if they've got that. The other thing to look at when you choose a financial advisor is how and how much you're going to pay them. Now, if somebody's just chasing commissions, and you must know this sort of thing. For example, these people that sold property syndications were earning commissions of anywhere between 6 and 15%. Well, if you take costs out of an investment of more than 5%, you're very unlikely to get a positive return on them. So when the total costs, as happened with these property syndications, came to over 20%, it's not surprising they've all imploded. So you've got to understand how you're paying that advisor, how much they're going to get. And you must agree on it. And also on the structure, you might agree that they can get commission. But my view always is rather pay an advisor a fee, basically for hours work for you. Don't ask me how much it should be. It's something that you negotiate. It's like if you go to a dentist or a doctor, different dentists and doctors, you pay them different amounts, often depending on the skill. but you must know what they're going to do for you. The other thing is, if somebody's just earning a commission, they're going to want to sell you stuff to be able to earn a living. If they're being paid a fee, rather like if you go to, I go to the doctor for an annual checkup every year. What I want the doctor to say to me is, you're great, you find that you need nothing. And I'm quite happy to pay him to give me that news. So in the same way you go to a financial advisor once a year or whenever you need to, and you say to the financial advisor, what's my financial status like? And the financial advisor looks at it, analyzes it, and says, you don't have to do a thing. But you must be prepared to pay the financial advisor for doing that. By paying a fee, they're not being incentivized to do the wrong thing in selling you a product.
Thanks, Bruce. Jeff, Bruce has introduced the topic of fees, and
I'm not going to run away.
Fees have obviously been under quite a bit of scrutiny lately, with the National Treasury bringing out some papers on how they think consumers should be charged for financial advice and services. Could you give us an idea of what are the reasonable fees a person should expect if they're seeking advice on retirement?
Laura, the issue of fees, I think, can become an emotional issue. Certainly, if I think of my own example, it was the reason I left a well-known life insurance company 21 years ago and joined a merchant bank, who at that stage had launched the living annuity. And so I start off by saying the two major words are transparency and disclosure. It's really a case of you sitting down with a financial advisor, understanding upfront what fees are going to be involved. There's no such thing as a free lunch. He's doing a service for you. And as long as you are comfortable with it, let's have a look at it. Depending on the type of financial advisory service, depending on the type of investments you have, there may well be an upfront financial advice fee. That is a fee given to meet with you maybe 2-3 times, to do a plan for you, to put together a structure, to position your investments in the correct places instead of the X number of boxes they may be in already. And that fee will be an upfront fee. It may be expressed in rands, or it may be expressed in a percentage term. So that's issue number one, the upfront. The ongoing, again, it depends on the type of investment you're in. And with your indulgence, Laura, I'll think of clients who, for argument's sake, are in living annuities as their pension vehicles. So what are the type of fees there? Every client in a living annuity obviously has a number of underlying funds within that living annuity. Those funds could be placed with Alexander Forbes, they could be with Allan Gray or Mutual Sunlam, who cares? But it's with an asset management company. That asset management company charges an annual asset management fee. It is disclosed. You as the client need to feel comfortable with it, and you need to, at least to know it and see it there. Whether you're with Coronation or Allan Gray, there is always an annual asset management fee. Some of those underlying funds, particularly some of the unit trusts, have a performance fee as well. So if the fund outperforms its benchmark, A, you need to be aware of what the benchmark is, and B, you need to be aware of the impact of that performance fee on you. In other words, what is being taken out of your investment. If you're in a living annuity, for argument's sake, there will be an annual administration fee, and that is given to the company with whom you have placed your living annuity money, or Mutual, Alexander Forbes, whoever it may be. Always disclosed. You see it on statements which are sent to you, totally transparent. And for me, I think the final element, well, there's actually two more, of those fees. The next to final one, the penultimate one, is of course the financial advisory service. You will discuss with your nominated financial advisor, be he an independent financial advisor or be he in a corporate situation, such as Alexander Forbes, what the annual financial advisory fee is, expressed usually as a percentage, and how that is paid. And then the final one is the one we always forget about, but it is significant, and that's our government. That's VAT. VAT comes in on most of those fees, with the exception of the administration fee. So those are the typical fees. There may be misconceptions about those fees, and I think it's vital that the financial advisor spells it out to you in writing, so that there's never any misunderstandings, and that you as clients ask the questions up front.
Thanks, Jeff. And if the financial advisor doesn't want to disclose those fees, then presumably it's not the financial advisor you should be looking to for advice.
Well, then I wouldn't be sitting in his office. I would have left his office. I would have phoned a large company as a starting point. And you start the debate all over again. He's telling you something if he does not disclose the fees.
Okay. Preez, did you want to add something?
Yeah, financial advisors have to, by law, disclose those fees anyway.
Yes.
To me, the issue is that, the point I didn't make was that what a financial advisor does more than anything else is they save you from yourself on making bad decisions. Jeff mentioned 2008 when the markets crashed. The number of people who wanted to jump out of the markets then, many were saved by good financial advisors who said, it will come right. This is an aberration. Stick with it, and look how it's come right. What was at 1,700 in 2008 is now at 52, 53 today. If you jumped out, and as some people did, and they stayed out, they've lost a fortune. They aren't able to retire. And you're paying for that. You're paying for that professionalism. And they are professionals. And as you pay for a doctor or a lawyer, I don't know why there's this resistance to paying for financial advice. It doesn't make sense to me.
And with that, that's our time up. So thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Bruce, for introducing the retirement decisions to the audience today. And the presentations that will follow will build on a number of the themes that we've raised in this panel discussion. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.